Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Season 3 of LA Legal. We made it a whole 3 seasons, and I'm super excited because this was just one of my most favorite projects. To start us off, I'm Liana, obviously. I'm joined by Neama Ramani, and we have a very special guest joining us on Episode 1, all the way from San Diego. Please introduce yourself, and we'll get started.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm attorney Ryan from San Diego. I'm a workers' rights lawyer, and thanks for having me, guys. It's good to be here.
Oh, so happy to have Ryan on the show. And the fact that we haven't been canceled after 2 seasons is a minor miracle. So speaking of canceled,
We're doing something right.
yeah, let's talk about someone who should have been canceled a long time ago.
100%. Harvey Weinstein. Born March 19, 1952 in Queens, he graduated college and the State University of New York at Buffalo. He and his brother and his friends founded Harvey and Corky Productions, an independent production company for rock concerts. They made a lot of money. They used that to then establish a new film production company called Miramax, and then everything else is history, right? So he becomes a huge Hollywood producer. He's got, power is limitless for this man. And so let's get started. Let's jump right in.
Yeah,
right?
It's more than just money in terms of power. It was his influence in Hollywood that really made him someone that people were intimidated to go up against. I think casually in the Hollywood community, people referred to him as God even. So this isn't a case of just someone with a lot of money who has the ability to affect your career. This is someone who, with the snap of his fingers, can make sure you never work again.
Yeah. And he did, right? For certain models and aspiring actresses, but he's got political power. He's got more money than God himself. He knows everyone.
Yeah, and as time is going on, we're getting more information about the tactics he would use to silence these women and keep them scared. I mean, it started with the normal stuff we see in sex harassment cases, things like, hey, it would be a good opportunity for us to be friends. Don't you know I can move mountains for you? You don't want me to be your enemy. And now we're finding out about these sort of intelligence agencies, like Black Cube, that he would employ to follow these women and get dirt.
I think that right there speaks about your power, right? When you get like Israeli, what are they, silencing
former intelligence officers. Yeah.
I mean, it's insane.
He's the face of what really started the Me Too movement.
Yes.
I mean, he's larger than life, literally and figuratively. The biggest creep probably in Hollywood. Maybe in the entire country.
And he looks like a creep, right? Like, he's just one of those where it's like, you're gross, you look like a creep. Like, if I didn't know who he was and saw him on the street, like, he's just yucky.
But interestingly enough, and I want to talk about it, him being a creep actually helped his defense in this case. Because the defense, and we're going to talk about it, is that this was all transactional sex. And what the defense said during their arguments were, this wasn't George Clooney, this wasn't Brad Pitt. Women were having sex with him consensually to advance their careers.
Man, I had a big problem with that argument. When we talk about transactional sex, first of all, it sounds a lot like quid pro quo sexual harassment. And for those who don't know, quid pro quo literally means this in exchange for that. And that's a kind of harassment where someone in a position of power basically says, hey, if you sleep with me, I will advance your career. Or if you don't have sex with me, bad things are going to happen. So when we have such a big gulf in the power dynamic, how much consent can there really be in that situation? So I think that defense was problematic.
I agree. And obviously in the employment context, that's a no-go, but these were women that obviously didn't have that employer-employee relationship. It was that sort of casting couch, culture. And the jurors in LA seem to have bought it. I mean, I got to tell you, I was surprised. But when this case got prosecuted, they decided to file charges when the New York trial had already started, right? Then Weinstein is convicted. He's sentenced to 23 years there in New York. His attorneys are appealing, so there's always a chance that that conviction gets overturned on appeals. I mean, the defense lawyers there are arguing that there are too many prior bad acts witnesses from a good old, evidence and the bar exam, But Jackie Lacey, the district attorney here, was really criticized. I mean, Weinstein was in LA, didn't prosecute any of these cases. She waits till New York files, then she files, and of course, she's kicked out of office. George Gascon's office takes over the case, and, we thought, the result would have been inevitable, the same, that he was going to be convicted on sexually assaulting 5 different women, and it really didn't happen that way.
We didn't get the slam dunk we wanted.
Yeah, they convicted him On the first Jane Doe, right?
Jane Doe 1, one of the Jane Does no shows, she doesn't want to have anything to do with it. So then there's 3 other Jane Does, 4 total. Jury hangs with respect to 2, and with respect to 1, they quit altogether. I mean, I got to tell you, I was floored that the defense got a 12-0 acquittal with respect to 1 of the victims.
Yeah. Well, let's very briefly talk about the New York trial, right? And I want to kind of go back and talk about exactly what happened, right? But interestingly, he had a woman representing him, and she got a lot of, she got, yes. So what's that smile? Tell me.
Well, especially with the Me Too movement, the whole point of this movement is, look, women are fundamentally disadvantaged at work. They are physically smaller than men. They are not as loud as men. Historically, they don't have the authority that men have. And then when we come into the employment context, whether you're a full-fledged employee or you're an independent contractor or, someone looking for a job, you still have to sort of bend to the will of these old men in power. So when we see someone who we would hope would be an ally and understand the struggle saying the exact opposite. Now, mind you, this wasn't just trying to mitigate the situation. She's saying that it was fully consensual or that all of these women are lying.
Right.
No. And to take such an extreme stance that's really off-putting to those of us who are on the other side of the movement, where we're trying to encourage women to speak up because so many women are afraid that someone is going to say, no, you're just after this man for his money. You're just trying to advance your career. How can we trust you? You're making this up.
I actually have a quote from her. She said, women are attracted to powerful men. They're attracted to older, powerful men. Women were throwing themselves at Harvey Weinstein. This is just for financial gain. So,
so the interesting thing is we all know that, of course, sexual assault, one of the most underreported crimes, and women are afraid to come forward because you have to really in a public way relive that trauma. But, speaking of women, men like to hire female defense attorneys in cases like this. And they actually and you think this goes against the conventional wisdom, they like older, more conservative female jurors because those jurors might think to themselves, listen, I would never put myself in that situation. Again, I don't agree with it, but it's an interesting defense strategy. It didn't work in New York, but apparently it worked
in LA.
Here in LA.
I'm really glad you brought that up.
Let's talk about that, though. Okay, so a lot of people are saying, well, how could this happen, right? I mean, why are you surprised? You're going to his hotel room and blah, blah, blah. So these are the questions, right? But let's talk about it. So this is Harvey Weinstein. He has, it's not like you're going to like a motel room. Like he's got suites, right? He's got living rooms in these suites, right? And so his assistant has actually come out and said that he holds a lot of his meetings there. So this is like not just for women to come over and, for him to attack them. He holds meetings there with like Steven Spielberg and other male, actors and producers in the industry. So it's not specific to women, right? Everyone comes over to his hotel rooms and then he, of course, is preying on women. So I don't know if it's well, you shouldn't have gone to his room type of thing, if that's where some of these casting calls are happening. Right. So what are these actresses and models supposed to do? Right. It's Harvey Weinstein.
I think the challenge is, and whatever you're doing, and Ryan nailed it. I mean, the defenses here primarily fall into 1 or 2. It wasn't me, really didn't happen, or that it was consensual. Those are the primary defenses in any sexual assault case. And again, just kind of peeling it back and saying, what did the jurors do, right? They convicted on, the counts relating to Jane Doe 1. And I think it was her actions afterwards. She went back to Italy. She didn't really have a whole lot of contact with him, where a lot of the victims, and I still believe that there were victims, even though, the jury acquitted with respect to 1, a lot of the victims continued to maintain contact with Harvey Weinstein. And I think that's what the defense pounded on, including Jennifer Newsom, right? Gavin Newsom's wife. If the first, lady of California can't get 12 jurors to convict. I mean, she has all the support behind her, all the financial resources. What does that mean for these other women who are afraid to come forward?
Can we talk about how frightening that is for victims? The first lady of California can be a victim to this kind of thing. So, I don't like when women are made to feel guilty. I don't like when we get some sample groups and ask them, hey, what do you think about the case here? And inevitably we will get someone, usually older, more conservative, say, well, why'd she put herself in that situation? Why did she go along? Why did she go to the motel room? Harvey Weinstein was the god of Hollywood. This man made that town move. If you do not sort of go along with things to an extent, you're not going to have a career. And then where are you? So to tell someone to make that very frightening, impossible decision, do you stand up to the most frightening man you've ever seen, who won't just make sure you don't work, he might send ex-Israeli intelligence officers after you.
And
this
that's
is terrifying.
Exactly it. What happens after you say no, right? I mean, if you're a young, aspiring model or actress or whatever, right? You find yourself in his room and he's being inappropriate. What do you do in that moment? What if he like just, I don't know, assaults you physically? Like, it's not like you can say, okay, no, bye. You're put in a very, very uncomfortable and scary situation.
Especially, absolutely, because, there's the career aspect that people hound on. Well, you wanted to be in a movie, so you did what you had to do. That argument fails, in my opinion, because, of course you're going to take a meeting with the Harvey Weinstein. You're crazy not to. And once you get in there, he's much bigger than you. He closes the door. And, unfortunately, some of the testimony, it was very hard to read. We talk about some of these women crying and begging him to stop, and he's still forcing himself on them. So the physical safety component must be addressed whenever someone comes and says, oh, well, why were you in that situation?
Right. Oh, yeah. And going back to Newsom, right? I mean, as soon as, she saw him, she started sobbing hysterically. So,
well, on multiple occasions too, he said, name any Hollywood actress. This is how they got their start, right? So again, it kind of puts you in a very vulnerable situation. Like, okay, now I'm screwed. I'm here. This is what I got to do, right? So to me, it goes back to that power and that inability to say no. It's not like women are like, okay, well, I'm here. I'll do what he says. It's just you're physically unable to say no.
Yeah, so then it goes back to that point, did it not happen? Maybe with respect to one of the victims, right? The masseuse, or was it consensual? Apparently the jurors thought that some of this conduct was consensual. I mean, again, blows the mind. They're deliberating for more than 10 days. And again, he still can be sentenced. He's going to die in New York State prison. He's in poor health. I mean, I understand that this is very important to these individual victims, but also it's important to women who have been sexually assaulted and abused everywhere, right? If it wasn't for, dozens, hundreds of women coming forward and accusing Harvey Weinstein, if he was just a one-off rape case, would he have ever seen the courtroom? Probably not, because these cases are very hard to prove. And the prosecutors, they like to stack up victims because jurors might not believe one victim, but they're sure going to be hard-pressed to disbelieve 4 victims. But I mean, think if you're a prosecutor. Prosecutors are very risk averse. Lawyers in general are risk averse. They don't like to lose. And I can guarantee you that they think that this Weinstein case was a loss, and they're going to be more hesitant the next time they don't have an avalanche of evidence. You don't have those contemporaneous reports to law enforcement, to doctors, to friends. If you have these delayed reports, maybe stories have because you have the trauma, right? You're not going to remember everything, that happened years ago. You might not want to remember. This is part of the psychology of these, and you certainly might not want to report it. So given this type of result, I think whether it's a Kevin Spacey, whether it's a Harvey Weinstein, this is going to embolden defendants in these types of cases to move forward very aggressively against their victims.
I think that's a really great point. And if I may, we may not be very satisfied with the result here. I think most of us wanted more from it. But I think the key takeaway here is Harvey Weinstein did not emerge from this unscathed. At the end of the day, he is going to suffer some real consequences, even if maybe we didn't quite get what we were looking for. So I hope that even though there were some weaknesses and things that didn't go our way, more women are looking at this and saying, look, if the mighty Harvey Weinstein can be brought down, anyone can be brought down. My manager at McDonald's who pushed me into the bathroom and did something,
I think he thought he was going to come out of this unscathed, right? When these allegations started coming out, he checks himself into like sex rehab for a week. I mean, you're abusing thousands of women at this point, and you think a week stint in rehab is going to come out in some BS apology that his team probably released. And so I think he thought that was going to be it, but I don't think this is a sex addict. This is a predator, and I think there's a very big distinction there. And so I think that he, maybe his team, they thought, okay, well, because that's what celebrities do, right? You get caught with drugs, you go to rehab, you come back, and you're forgiven. And so I think that's what he thought was going to happen.
Well, you don't blame him for thinking that, because for the longest time in Hollywood, that's how it was. Right. They go to rehab, they have a high-profile press release, say, I'm sick, it wasn't my fault, I can't control myself. The man's throwing anything against the wall that he think might stick, some sort of, it was compulsive behavior, I'm sick, feel bad for me, or, they wanted it because I'm so irresistible.
Yeah.
Is that what his attorney was saying?
Lord.
Yeah, you know, these are the sort of things where they're just trying to make something stick. But what you have, how many women came forward?
A lot.
Yeah,
A lot.
I mean, you've got some of the biggest names in Hollywood. You have Gwyneth Paltrow, Angelina Jolie, Rose McGowan is like the face.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Which, by the way, I didn't know. I actually found out recently that she actually told Matt Damon and Ben Affleck what had happened. Did you guys know this?
I'd heard something about Matt coming forward.
Sorry. She actually at one of the film festivals, she told Matt Damon and Ben Affleck what happened, and the reaction was, "Ugh, we told them to stop doing that." So they knew.
Yeah.
So not that I'm surprised that people knew, but it seems like actors knew, people in Hollywood knew.
Yeah, but all those actors that were supposedly going to come and corroborate these victim statements. I mean, Mel Gibson was supposed to show up.
Yeah, that's right.
We didn't see. There's the men that really want to have nothing to do with this. We saw this, and again, I'm not saying that it was a very different case, but I remember Amber Heard. She said, "I'm gonna have all these victims come. I'm sorry, all these people. Elon Musk is gonna come. Everyone's gonna come support what I'm saying." No one showed up. So not only do you need to have a strong case in terms of your own testimony, but you better hope the people that you say that you told are going to come support you're going to show up at trial, because they might not.
Yeah.
Well, 100%, but I'm also kind of pointing this out to kind of show how like sick and perverted people in Hollywood and also outside of Hollywood are, right? People know that these things happen in the workplace even, and people don't speak up, men or women, right? Sometimes they're like, "Oh, he's the boss," whatever, and
people get afraid of the he said, she said situation. And for what it's worth to anyone's listening, a skilled, experienced sexual harassment attorney, if what you're saying is true and you can give us some testimony, we can typically make something happen. It's not like you're going to go and no one's going to believe you. And I think that's what people in Harvey Weinstein's position count on. They really try to push this, it's all hearsay, you have nothing, no one's going to believe you, and once no one believes you, no one will hire you. So we need to focus on ways that victims can make sure that they can prove their case when time comes for it. And we've seen some weaknesses in these cases. They say, well, there wasn't a police report, or there was a police report a year later.
Yeah, but
things of that nature.
You know what I mean? This isn't just some schmo off the street. Like, what, you're going to go and file a police report against Harvey Weinstein, and then what's going to happen? Like, I understand why these police reports didn't take place.
Oh, I understand too. It's an impossible position to put someone in. And that's why these crimes are so heinous, because you're putting someone in an impossible position.
Right.
Yeah, and those accused, I mean, oftentimes the best defense is a good offense. They come after these victims aggressively. There's a huge disparity in power. There's disparity in wealth. And whether it's like the Israeli special ops or just litigation, defamation cases, they come after them. And this is really how it is. I mean, the abusers tend to be older, rich, powerful men. And even when they admit to it, right? You have Bill Cosby, right? He's under oath. He's admitting to drugging women. He has an outstanding team of lawyers. I don't agree with it. He litigates it, and on appeal, his conviction is reversed. So, think of how those victims feel. So, it's just the reality that, men that have money will throw a lot of at these victims to try to defeat these,
because they have the resources. Just to wrap up that original point, you guys know that the only person that ever confronted him was Brad Pitt, surprisingly, because he was with Gwyneth Paltrow at the time, and she told him what had happened, and so he went up to him and he kind of like pushed him and was like, "Don't you ever do that again."
Really?
And can you imagine the fear to him though too, right? Because he can get like, that's it, your career could be over, but thankfully it
didn't
wasn't.
seem to affect his career. I wonder why that happened. I don't know if we have insights on that one.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Of all people, Brad Pitt.
Well, good for him.
I always thought I liked him.
Yeah. For him. But yeah, I thought that was...
Well, the irony is he's being accused of abuse in his own case now with his ex-wife, Angelina Jolie.
There you go.
So I don't know if there's any merit to that, but there's a whole...
Well, in that moment, it's nice to see someone being an ally.
Someone
at
actually,
least,
exactly. So, Neama, I have a question for you, or, jump in. But I think... I want to talk a little bit about the sentencing, right? Because he's convicted 23 years in New York, and then, he comes over here, gets convicted. So what does the sentencing look like, right? Because I think that's really interesting for viewers.
So he was in Rikers Island, infamous New York State prison, while he was on trial, right, to transport. Now, I think he's in Buffalo. He's upstate serving his time over there. And he has to finish that sentence before he begins his sentence here. And, you see, the trial wasn't televised, but you see Harvey Weinstein. He's not in good shape at all. He's not going to survive that sentence. But once he's done with that sentence, he will be sentenced in this case. And then he's going to go back to New York to serve his sentence. And then if he actually survives.
Do we know why all of a sudden he goes from just kind of like walking around like this big hotshot to then like now needing a walker? It's almost like this fall from grace. What's that attorney, Girardi, too, right?
Oh,
he was like, all of a sudden he's coming to court. He needs a cane. Like, what happens to you guys?
There's a couple of things. One, it's a good defense strategy. So you actually feel sorry for this. Look, people don't like to convict old men and old women. I mean, it's just, that's just it.
He's so, like in his early 60s.
Yeah,
like,
so it's part of the defense strategy, number one. The second is, these aren't, the Weinsteins of the world, these are hardened criminals that can like survive, even like a couple days in prison, they age pretty quickly.
Right.
I mean, they're used to a life of luxury, Well,
I think it's
the Beverly Hills Hotel or what he was doing all this.
I think it's possible that he might actually not even make it to LA. I mean, 23 years is a long time. Is it still being appealed?
Yeah, it's being appealed in New York.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Again, he's got good lawyers there, but on the merits, I mean, he lost and lost bad. But, whether it's New York or LA, I think it's going to be like a Bob Durst type that just finally receives criminal justice and ultimately, dies without really atoning for his sins.
He deserves it.
No, the guy isn't repentant at all. And that's probably one of the most frustrating things about this is to the very end, he's saying it never happened. They lied, or they just wanted me. They just wanted me so bad. And I can't tell you how many of these sex harassment cases I've done where we have an unrepentant aggressor. Someone who just to the very end, they say, well, she wanted me. And if I have to pay her to make this go away, it's really sick. Yeah. And it's unfortunate because I always say there's two sides to the justice equation. We can't go back in time and make the abuse never happen. We wish we could. The only thing we have is money. We'll try to give you some money and try to make things better. That's all we have. That's all we have. And then the other side of the equation is hoping that the perpetrator has learned their lesson and won't do it again. And with Weinstein, he's certainly not repentant. He hasn't learned anything, but I think it's safe to say he's not going to do it again.
Yeah.
I think we've got that part of the justice equation under control.
Right.
And hopefully it's a lesson to other men in Hollywood, producers, that like the tide has shifted, And
that was going to be my last question for you guys. What do you think this trial did? I mean, the fact that he is serving time in prison, do you think that we're going to see a shift or no? Because we see these things kind of rear their heads, and then we kind of all go back to.
I've got a few
old
thoughts
ways.
on that.
I mean, I don't know if you want to go. I can start. Obviously we are on the victim side. I'm a liberal-minded individual, but I do see this as like kind of two steps forward, one step back. It was a huge leap. Me too. You have, and again, I just brought up all the examples of these men, right? Whether it's Weinstein, whether it's Cosby. Kevin Spacey, not yet, but he's being charged in the UK. We'll see if he receives justice there. These are some of the biggest names in Hollywood, right, that have gone down after doing this for decades where, women weren't believed. So, I mean, that's a big step. But again, now you have kind of this Men Too. There have been, and you talk to jurors and some of them think, well, maybe this has gone too far, right? The biggest case, of course, being Amber Heard. And again, each case is unique. You got to sort of analyze it on its own individual facts and the merits of that case. But you kind of see the pendulum swinging a little bit towards the men, a little bit. But I think we've still made significant progress in the past 5 years.
I agree.
I think the 2 steps forward, 1 step back is the best analogy I've heard on it. That's exactly what happened. Sort of the unfortunate thing that I see is we see these powerful men who, maybe are taking things too far at the office. They'll make a joke. And the most common joke I see is, oh, I don't want to get Me Too'd. I don't want to get Me Too'd. They say, you look pretty today. Is that okay? Am I going to get Me Too'd? And I really have a problem with that because they're kind of mocking the woman's situation in that case. And it shows me that they're not taking it serious. But there's another side to it. At least there is a moment of hesitation there. And, 10, 15 years ago, that might not have existed. So at least we have a little bit of hesitation with these guys. And whether they're doing it for moral reasons, it doesn't appear to be that way. But maybe fear will put the balance of power just a nudge enough into the victim's corner so that women aren't so afraid to speak up when something happens.
Even if it's not hesitation, it's that moment of like, okay, let me just watch what I'm saying for a second, type of thing. Like, I'm just going to pause. Even if it's a joke, you can, whatever, but at least you're thinking about it. So.
Yeah, well, the best way to not get Me Too'd is to simply not be a creep. You know,
Yes.
that's a really
If
good way to
everyone
be
could just
safe.
stop being a creep, that would be great. Thank you.
And hopefully men in
Okay,
power,
that's
I mean, look, they're looking around, they're seeing what happened, they change their behavior. And whether it's, people with power or people with money, greed, we see it, I mean, Elizabeth Holmes, big deal. She's going to prison for a long time. Sam Bankman-Fried, probably next. So,
He needs to stop tweeting.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't imagine what his attorneys go through on a
my
daily
God.
basis.
Just that's
Like
I'd throw his phone into the ocean if I was his attorney.
But yeah, I mean, people, other executives, I mean, they got to take notice, right? That if they kind of do the same thing, they're going to go down.
I think one way that'll help and what this might lead to is also more representation of women in positions of power too.
Yeah.
I mean, getting that female perspective. First of all, it's absolutely necessary. I know on my team, my ops division is run by women. They're just good at it,
We are.
But having that female perspective, being like, hey, what do we need to do to make sure we're getting the most of everyone on the team and making sure everyone feels safe, celebrated, and welcome here. So getting more of that female representation, I think, is going to really push the balance of power.
I agree.
I also think with female empowerment, we want to teach the younger generations their worth, right? And with that, I think comes the ability to say no. Like,
Yes.
I'm not comfortable with this. This is not okay. I'm going to walk out. And so I think that's where the tide's changing a little bit, is that, I think that we can empower these young girls to be more confident and more aware of what they bring to the table and what, the sky really is the limit. And I think that's where I think we'll hopefully, people are not going to stop being creeps, but hopefully if women can have the ability to put their foot down and say no.
Takes
then we
practice
can-
to develop
yeah,
that kind
absolutely.
of backbone. And
Right.
and men need to realize that we don't lose anything from women being empowered. There's a lot of men that see feminism as a bad thing. They see the Me Too movement as a bad thing. And they don't understand no one's taking any power or autonomy away from you. You can still be a very influential member of the team. We're just asking you to give women a fair shot. Right. A little more 50-50 and less 90-10, like it's been for so long.
Right. I agree with you. Final thoughts?
I'm on board with that. I think women have been getting the shaft. I mean, it's a bad expression to use. I mean, but they've been getting screwed, whatever you want to say, for so many years. So I'm really happy that, finally, whether it's the Weinsteins of the world or anyone who's similarly situated in an employment context and in casting, any sort of disparity in power, that's shifting. And, I'm excited for my daughter, her generation, and future generations. I think it's going to be much better for the women of America.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for joining. This was a super special and super awesome first episode to our third season. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for coming from San Diego. I mean,
Thanks for having me. I love
that
LA.
makes us
Go
feel
Kings.
So cool. But anyway, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for joining on LA Legal.